Hoi hoi. Today I'm going to read you all chapter 2 from my book, Immortal Love by Lynnsey Carrigan, a.k.a. me. Lucian Black stared up into the vast black sky, and another night was upon him. He inhaled the scents of the night with his heightened sense of smell, from the damp earth to newborn leaves growing on the trees. The wind was light in the cool air. The moon was as bright as the sun is during the day. Of course, that night is his day now. It had been for a very long time. There had been times when he missed the rising sun. However, he had come to love the night as he had loved the day in his old life. He looked towards the west where he could see the lights from the town of Bayhaven. He lived outside of town on a hill surrounded by dense woods in an old mansion he built after immigrating to America in the late 1700s. It was a nice and quiet place to one who had normal hearing. Since his sense of hearing was heightened, he could still hear what was happening in town. Yet it wasn't a problem for him to lower the volume as he had learned to do so during his fledgling years. He had to leave his mansion occasionally to ward off suspicion. After all, he couldn't age. It would be weird to the locals to see him every day and notice that he did not grow old. When he returned, though, he claimed to be his son. For the last 3 centuries, he had changed his name whenever he returned to his home in Bayhaven. Now, this part will be fun because I don't know how to say Gaelic, and he has a Gaelic name. He had been born as Lucian Mac Ganola Dubh. For any of my fans in Ireland, how do you pronounce Giolla in Gaelic? And same thing for Dhuibh. Actually, that question is directed to anyone who knows how to speak Gaelic, not just people from Ireland. Moving on. He had been born as Lucian Mac, the 2 names I can't pronounce, in Ireland during the late 10th century. The name Dubh means black in Gaelic. His father was a shepherd who always made a good bundle selling sheep. His parents had 5 children. He was the youngest son but the middle child. Out of all the children, he had the least expectations from his parents. His eldest brother, Joseph, was going to inherit the family's farm that had been in the family for generations. The second eldest brother, Matthew, was going to inherit the family's business of selling sheep. Both of his younger sisters, Anna and Hannah, were expected to find husbands who will take care of them. All that was expected from him was to buy his own farm, marry a virgin, have a lot of children, and provide for his family by selling produce that he grew on his farm. There were traditional roles in his family. The women kept the house up, cooked, gathered, and made clothes. The men tended to the farming, hunting, and herding the sheep. While he wasn't inheriting anything from his parents, he was taught how to read and write. On some days, his father would take him out with him to herd the sheep. On other days, he would stay home and tend the land. When it rained, he was taught writing and reading skills. Other times, he made trips with his father into town to buy supplies or relax at the tavern. Life had been that way from the time he learned to walk until he met his wife. He met Catherine when he was 24. A year later, he had married her. Soon they had 2 beautiful children. His son John was born first, followed by their daughter Raven a year later. He taught John how to tend the land and watch over the sheep. Catherine taught their daughter how to tend the house, gather, cook, and make clothes. His family was close, and he loved them dearly. 8 years after Raven was born, his life was destroyed. He left his family to sell produce in the town market. He didn't realize it would be the last time he would sell them again. He had been gone for a week. When he returned to home, he found a dark X on the front door. The windows had been boarded up. The door was locked from the inside, and he couldn't open it from the outside. He had learned the tragic news of why his home had been condemned. His family had been wiped out by the pestilence that had swept through the area. His daughter had died first, followed by his son and then his wife. He didn't get to say goodbye to them before they left this world. He didn't get to hold their hands as they died in their beds. Then again, had he been home during that whole time, he would eventually succumb to the symptoms of the pestilence himself and died. If losing his family wasn't bad enough, his home was burned to the ground the day after he returned to prevent the pestilence from spreading. All the houses that had victims of the pestilence were burned to the ground, so he had become homeless. He debated returning to his parents' farm in the next county or finding another place to live, perhaps in town. He had always loved to come to town and relax in a tavern. Perhaps he could be a tavern owner of some kind. However, regardless which path he went down, he decided he would spend one more night at the graves of his family. As he knelt beside their graves, crying his eyes out, he felt he wasn't alone. He turned around to find a beautiful woman staring at him. She had long red hair that flowed like a river over her shoulders. Her eyes were an emerald green. Her skin was pale, though her cheeks were flushed pink. She was about 5'6". She wore a long white gown with a flowing blue cloak. "What's wrong, my dear sir?" she had asked curiously, her voice absolutely beautiful. "I lost my wife and children a couple days ago." "Did they die from the pestilence?" she had asked sympathetically. He nodded. "You have my condolences, good sir." She bowed her head. "Thank you," he snuffled. "How long were you and your wife married?" 10 summers. "How old were your children?" "My son was 9, he replied, tears sliding down his cheeks. My daughter was a year younger than him. "I'm truly sorry for your loss," she said sincerely. "Thank you. Do you have a place to live?" He shook his head. "No, they burned my home down to prevent the epidemic from spreading. Would you like to come home with me?" "Would your husband protest that?" he asked suspiciously. She smiled. Her teeth were incredibly white, which sent a shiver of unease down his spine. Then again, if they were horribly stained, that would have made him uneasy too. "There isn't a husband," she told him. "So why do you want me to come home with you?" "You need a place to stay," she replied. "I need companionship." He thought about her offer. He could feel the flames of guilt heat the back of his neck. Back of his neck. I don't know where the heck I got necks from. He had just lost his wife and children a couple days ago. Was it really a wise idea to go with another woman? Not another human. Was it really a wise idea to go with another woman back to her home? He felt torn. On one hand, when he married Catherine, he swore to be with her until death departs them both. Since she was dead now, that meant their marriage was now void in God's eyes. Yet his wife hadn't been dead for a week. It didn't seem proper to be with another woman so soon after Catherine's death. "We're not going to share a bed if that's what you're worried about," Aurora assured him, as if she read his thoughts. That was strange, he thought to himself. It seemed like she just read his mind. That was impossible, though. No one could read anyone's thoughts. Wow, maybe he was losing his mind. It must be the griefs that's causing him to lose his marbles. He shook his head inwardly before dawning on his decision once more. Finally, he agreed to go home with her. After saying his last goodbyes to his wife and children, he lifted her on top of his horse. The horse was skittish at first, but settled down after she patted him a couple times. He swung up after her, and they rode toward her house, which was a manor. He stared at the massive structure in awe as they rode up to it. They left his horse at the barn and went inside his hostess's expansive dwelling. Her servant served him a bowl of stew, a small slice of bread, and a goblet of wine. He noticed that she didn't eat, but she told him she had dined earlier in the evening. I realize I made a mistake. I already called her by name earlier in the book, but oh well. Stuff like that happens. Sorry about that. He learned many things that night after his supper. His hostess was called Lady Aurora, and the manor had been in her family for generations. Her family wasn't native to Erie, but came from Italy. By the way, Erie is Gaelic for Ireland, for those of you who don't know what Erie is, other than the place in Pennsylvania. However, her family had been in Erie for a long time, so she didn't know any Italian. He lived with her at the manor for 6 months. He found it very strange he didn't see her during the day, except in the morning before 10 a.m. and after 2 p.m. Her servants didn't seem to mind that their mistress wasn't around during those 5 hours. He noticed that she didn't eat that much. When she did eat, she never ate any meat. She just had soups and stews. Again, her servants didn't seem surprised about her dietary habits. One evening, a month later, he had asked her where she was at during the day, between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. She told him that she was managing the manor's affairs in her late husband's office. He had found that odd, since it was unheard of for a woman to manage any business matters. Then again, maybe that was typical for a noblewoman. After all, he was just a commoner and didn't know that much about how noble folk lived. He also inquired about her unusual diet that night. She explained to him that she didn't eat meat because she always felt ill after consuming it. As to the issue of why she rarely ate, she told him that she simply wasn't hungry. While he didn't believe her answer about why she didn't eat much, he left the issue alone. He didn't want to keep asking his hostess the same questions because he didn't want to anger her. Despite all that, the times they spent together were wonderful. They talked all the way until dawn, which was when she always left to go to her bedchamber. She held him when he grieved for his wife and children. She laughed beautifully whenever he amused her with a humorous story or a joke. She argued fiercely whenever they had a debate. She was impressed whenever he told her stories of farming and shepherding. One night he had taken her to a bed. The lovemaking had been incredible. She made love with expertise. It was like she had practiced for centuries in giving pleasure, which he shook his head at the thought, because no one could be alive for centuries. Yet the lass knew how to kiss and caress him. She had known when to arch her lips to meet him at each thrust he made to her. Catherine had been a good lover, but she would have been no match for Aurora's drag skills. That thought had made him feel guilty until he came. When they made love for a second time, she was riding him. As he came, he noticed that he felt a brief sharp pain as she had bent over his neck. It felt like he had been bitten by a mosquito. Intense pleasure quickly replaced the pain. It was so pleasurable he had a second release. As he lay there looking up at the ceiling, darkness began to cloud his vision. He felt Aurora pull away from his neck, and she stared down at him. At the time he thought he had imagined a trail of crimson running down her chin. It was the last image he had as darkness swallowed him. There was a coppery taste in his mouth when he woke the next evening. Aurora was standing beside the bed, staring down on him with concern and regret. She informed him that he had become what she was, a vampire. He was violently ill afterwards. She explained to him that his body was ridding itself of toxins, which was usually a horrible process for a newly made vampire because the pain was excruciating. The only vampires who didn't have to go through that horrible ordeal were natural-born vampires like her. He had been amazed that she had been born as a vampire, and that she was 2,000 years old. She informed him that vampires had been on the planet since the dawn of time, and used to live in societies like the human race. However, the numbers of natural-born vampires had dwindled near extinction because they were hunted and killed by humans. For the next couple of nights, she taught him how to survive as a vampire. Then on the 5th night, he found a letter from her on the dresser in his room. He sat down at the edge of the bed and read the letter. Dear Lucian, I would like to inform you that the manor is now yours. I will not have any need for it as I'm moving on to my next life. This life has gotten tedious for me. While I have lived for 2,000 years, I've missed those that I have lost. With great longevity comes a huge disadvantage. You start to lose people that you love and care about. One thinks they can become numb after a time of losing loved ones, but I can't. Besides, what's the point of living if you can't have someone to share it with? While it's okay to be alone sometimes, it starts to become tedious after a century or two. I'm done with it all. I'm ready to see all my family and friends I've lost. I wish you well in your endeavors. With love, Aurora. A somber realization dawned on him as he finished reading her letter. He hadn't sensed her presence since he had risen from his slumber. It had meant only one thing. She had already destroyed herself. Eventually, his mind wandered back into his body from the past. It was time to go to work. He worked as a bouncer for a local tavern from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. He didn't really need to work since he had saved up a lot of money over the centuries. However, it gave him something to do at night. He made sure that the perimeter and his lair were secure. When he was satisfied, he left the property. As he walked to his job in town, he thought about the woman in his dreams from 2 years ago. It was amazing how she came to him in his sleep. It was like an angel coming down to hell to visit the devil. He did wonder if she ever found her husband and daughter since she was searching for them. Were they still alive? More importantly, was she still alive? And that is the end of the second chapter. Well, I noticed I forgot to give a warning that this contained a little bit of graphic sex. It's been a while since I read my book and all, let alone since I wrote it. A reminder, you can get my book for free on your Kindle or your Kindle app on October 25th and 26th at Amazon. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll answer anything, and I'll answer it in the comments rather than make a video about it. So, that's it for today. Bye-bye.